Hello, I'm happy you're here. This video is very much overdue and I feel like I'm going to be doing a lot of talking and I feel like there's going to be a lot of pausing. So I doubt this will be in one take. I'm sure the light's gonna change, I'm sure the position's gonna change, my clothes might even change, the day might change. I have 19 books to talk to you about and I haven't scripted anything, so we're just gonna like go off the top of the head. We're going to talk about the books I read for the fourth quarter of the year, so October, November, and December, and also picking the book of the month from each of those months to have them compete bracket style for the book of the year. So I am just going on to my Storygraph at the minute, and I'm going to remind myself what I even read in October, November, and December, because 19 is a lot of books and I don't remember what most of those were. So October was a good month for reading. So I read 6 books in October. The first book I read was The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. And this was my first introduction to her. I have a book for her to read. I have an arc to read for her from NetGalley called The Faraway Inn. And that's going to be coming out at the end of March. So I really should get to reading this book. I also have another book on NetGalley that I have not touched yet, and that is coming out on February 10th, so I think I might need to focus a little bit on my arcs. I'll just send those to my Kindle now, so maybe I will remember. Great. So, The Spell Shop, Sarah Beth Durst. I gave this book 5 stars. I had so much fun with this book. I love the sentient plant. I love the idea that there was like a lot of push and pull emotionally for... Sorry, my brain remembers things, not so much of like the facts of the matter, but how it made me feel inside. So I'm trying to remember what the lead character's name was in The Spell Shop. Keela. So we're following Keela and Kaz, who is a sentient spider plant who escapes the burning down of the magical library. And they sail away with just a few books. They were the last to leave the library. They knew that this war, this uprising was coming for them, and they came for the library, they came for the knowledge, and Keela tried to save as much as she could, and they end up going back to the island that she grew up on, and now she has to keep these books hidden because she has stolen them. And she has this kind of fight with herself, like, do I use these books? Do I use these books to better this island with a really weak economy because it's so far out of the way? And there's such a fun play with the magic and political system in it, where the island's kind of suffering because they haven't had magic sent to their island for so long. Usually the government would send sorcerers out there to help with the weather, to help with their harvests and everything. And that was really fun to see the integration of what the magic means in this world. I would love to read, I think the next one is The Greenhouse, The Enchanted Greenhouse, and then The Sea of Charms, which comes out in 2026. So I've got some catching up to do to make sure that I am ready for the Sea of Charms, but I also need to read the new book she's got coming out in March. She has a couple books coming out then. So really enjoyed this book. It was really fun. It gave me that cozy fantasy that I had needed. Like the beginning of October, I was just desperate for something really cozy because I had read horror for the whole month of September. So after forcing myself to read for a month of horror and only ending up reading 3 books, I was so desperate to just mood read, and cozy fantasy was what I wanted to mood read, and The Spell Shop hit that spot so nicely. You get a little undercurrent of a romance kind of happening, but then you get found family in this kind of economic stress and political unrest. It was just such a fun read. I gave it 5 stars. It was the perfect thing I needed at that time. The next book I read was Dim Sum of All Fears by Vivian Chen, and this is the second book in the Noodle Shop mystery series, and I listened to this on audiobook, and I just love a little cozy mystery situation when it comes to my listening, when it comes to my audiobooks. I don't always review books on Storygraph or Goodreads, but I did feel compelled to review it for this book, and that's just because there's also like an underlying romance happening in this book, and I just cannot stand him. I think he is such a weenie. He is so annoying. I think Lana, our main character, could do so much better than him, but I do enjoy this level of a cozy mystery, like they're solving murders most of the time, in the last 2 books that I've read, she has been sleuthing around to solve these murders, and it's nothing too complicated that I can't follow along with while also doing my chores. And I have cruised through the Vampire Knitting Club series, so that is also a cozy mystery, but like more of a paranormal situation where you're following a yarn shop owner who just keeps coming across these murders. And at a certain point I found in that series, like, can you give me a different mystery? It doesn't always need to be a murder. Like, we don't have to completely copy the formula of Murder, She Wrote. Like, what if there was a big accident that needed solving, or something that's stolen that needs solving without murder being involved? I would love that to happen in this series, so I hope that they're not all going to be murders. But I did enjoy this book. I did give it a 3.5, which for me I think is a pretty standard rating that I would give to a book like this. Definitely a good listen, and I would be looking for the 3rd book in this series once I'm, you know, start to look for another something to listen to. Then I read an arc called The Brood by Rebecca Baum, and this falls under the like horror genre, so I was trying to read this in September, but I just didn't manage to push myself through it. It was like, it felt kind of speculative. It was mysterious and dark. It's kind of like a feminist piece, and I think I must have written a review for this because it is an arc that I got through NetGalley. So let me just remind myself what I said about this. Okay, so this is more of like a body horror, and it's a relationship between women and their bodies. So we are following our main character, Mary Welton, and she's leaving the funeral of her old mentor that she was working with at the law firm that they were both at. Just talking about being a woman in that kind of field. She then drives away from the funeral to go to lock herself in a little cabin. So she's driving through like upstate New York to get to this cabin to do a lock-in for herself to focus on a case and the materials, and her car ends up going off the road, and she wakes up in the clutches of this woman who calls herself Girl, and Girl is very adamant that Mary is her mother, and she had left her there, and she had done all of these torturous things to, like, the mother had done a lot of torturous things to Girl. So Mary is trying to play along because she is being held captive by Girl in this situation. But some body horror stuff comes in. So if you're a bit squeamish and you have like an issue with bugs, this one might not be it for you. But basically, Girl looks after the brood and she takes care of the babies. It did get a little bit confusing. I gave this a 3.25. I thought it was a little hard to follow, but I did like the addressing of women's relationship with their bodies, because they use their bodies to help secure the brood, and talking about women's bodily autonomy as well in this book. It's pretty dark, it's kind of gross, so if that's like not for you, I'd probably just skip it then. I've been trying to expand my genres, and horror isn't really something that I've touched on before, but there were some horror books that I really liked, like the undercurrent messaging in these horror books and like what they're trying to say about society as a whole. So I'm trying to find like the type of horror that works for me. Oh, I think we might be coming up on our first break here. Might have to do this month by month. The next book I read was Just Last Night by Mari McFarlane, and I listened to this on audiobook, and oh my gosh, this is not a romance. I don't know why it's shelved under romance. There is like a relationship building, budding happening in the undercurrent, but this is a book about grief. This is not a romance book. But with that in mind, I really did enjoy this listen, and I think because I've read Marley McFarlane before in the past, I read Cover Story in the summer. I think for me, because there is a lot of heavy like British slang in it, listening to it really helped me understand what the hell they were talking about, because the narrator is putting inflections in spots that make more sense than when I read it with my American brain. So there's a few more Marty McFarlane books I would like to get into after having listened to just last night. It was emotional. It was just grief-stricken, and just, I gave it a 4. I really enjoyed this story. I don't want to give too much away about like what the grief is, because it came out of nowhere for me, and I think that that is really essential for having this book and having the event be instant out of nowhere and take you by surprise. I think that helps you get into the mindset of the character who is processing the grief. It was a wonderful listen. The 5th book I read in October was Beartown by Friedrich Bachmann, and I read this as a buddy read with a couple of my friends, and I'm so thankful for that, because this book emotionally destroyed me. This book I could not stop thinking about for weeks. I could not get this book out of my head. We are placed in a small town in Sweden where it's cold and the people are tough, and they have one thing that brings them all together, and that is the hockey teams that are from the area. And we are following this breakout team with this breakout star. This is the year. This is the year that Beartown gets put on the map because of their hockey team, their pride and joy. Their hockey team is doing so well, and they are about to just bring in so much opportunity to the town because of their talents. And then a huge event takes place which completely turns everything on its head, and now this town is being ripped in 2 directions. Who's gonna back who? Who's in whose corner? Who is in the right? Who's in the wrong? What's money have to play? What's politics doing in all of this? And is it revenge? Is it, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff. It is also beautifully translated, so I can only assume that it's beautifully written, because Friedrich Bachmann is Swedish, so this is a translated book. And I loved the writing style in this. It was so lyrical, so beautiful, so poignant. There's a lot of point of view swapping. You are not just following one character, you are following the town. The town itself kind of is the embodiment of the story, like how the town works and pulls and pushes together. And I loved it. I thought it was gorgeous. I gave it 5 stars. I cried. So many tears. So many tears for Beartown. So after that emotional turmoil, I needed something a little bit lighter. So the last book I read on audio was The Devil Made Me Brew It by Sarah Piper. And this is like paranormal-ish fantasy romance. I gave it a 3. I thought it was very middle of the road, but it was exactly what I needed to recover from Beartown, so I'm very happy with having listened to it. The narrators, gorgeous, beautiful. I loved the narration for this book. I just struggled a little bit with the characters. I didn't quite understand the relationship or like the why of it all, but I thought the female married character was super boring, and I thought that the love interest liked her too fast, and also his pet name for her was dumb. It was so off-putting. It was wild. It really took me out of it, but other than that, it was a fine to listen to, middle of the road, solid 3. It was the narrators, I think, that really kept me engaged with the story. I don't think that I would have done as well to actually read this particular book. But with that being said, I had 2 5-star reads, but so above and beyond, and because of the emotional turmoil, the book of the month of October was so easily Beartown by Friedrich Bachmann. It was gorgeous, beautiful, wonderful, devastating, and I've had to read more because it is the first book of 3. We're gonna have a little intermission here, a little intermish, and then we'll talk about the 6 books I read in November. Okay, we're back. It's later. We've got the ring light, got a hoodie, and whatever is happening. I wore makeup for the first time today in like months, and it's gone. It's gone now. Okay, let us look at the books that I read in November. So the first book I read in November was The Witches of Holloway Road by Iris Spiegelhol. Iris Spiegelhol is one of the first authors that I binge read once I was getting back into reading after having both of my kids. So Iris Spiegelhol always is going to have a very special place in my heart as an author. With that being said, I gave this book a 2.5. I just didn't find the writing in this book as good as the writing in some of her other books, but even then, her other books, sometimes there were spelling errors and editing errors and stuff, but she, I believe, is an indie author, so sometimes that's gonna happen, especially if you're trying to just get a lot of books out at once. I think some of the editing and story progress kind of gets lost along the way. But this is a prequel to her Myrtlewood Mysteries books, which was one of the first series that I completely binged when I was getting back into reading. So I wanted to give it a little check. I wanted to see what it was all about. But it's been 2 months and I don't remember a lot. I know we were following Ursula, I believe was her name, and she does not know that she has magic. She comes home to house sit for her aunt and grandmother, and they're like, today's the day, like she's gonna learn our girl's got magic. But I was just trying to do something cozy, something quick to, I don't know, just move the season along a little bit. The second book I read in November was The Baby Dragon Cafe by A.T. Qureshi, and I rolled my eyes through this entire book. This was one that I probably should have DNF'd. I love the little concept of it. We live in a world where there are dragons. People keep dragons as a pet. And we are following, what is her name? I cannot remember any of these FMC's names because they all just do the same things. Saphira. That's right, Saphira, and the male love interest, his name is Aiden. Aiden is from a more affluent family that is in this world. And Saphira is not. She is a small business owner, and she opens up a baby dragon cafe. And people who own dragons, there's, you know, a lot of insurance that comes with owning dragons because they make a mess when they're babies and they burn stuff. So she's constantly trying to keep her cafe in business, even though these baby dragons keep burning shit down. And I kind of loved that aspect of it. Like, it was kind of silly and whimsical, like, ugh, these baby dragons, ugh, this insurance doesn't cover enough for these people, so even though they have insurance to cover stuff, I still can't completely replace this thing these baby dragons destroyed. Until she meets Aiden, who again is from an upper class family in this society, because you have to be a type of person to own dragons, and you have to be an extra type of person to own the type of dragons that Aiden's family has. And they also participate in dragon racing, which is illegal, but it's like illegal. Aiden comes into this dragon because his dead brother gave him this egg, and then it hatched. He didn't really want this dragon. Now he's stuck with this dragon. He's like, I can't get rid of this dragon. It was my dead brother's dragon. And so Saphira, who loves dragons, is too lower class to have a dragon of her own, helps Aiden, and by helping Aiden, she's able to get money to keep her cafe going, which is so nice, so wonderful, very wholesome. This book could have done so much more talking about the class divide, and I felt very let down that this book didn't talk about it so much when it is clearly such a big point of contention in this world. Like, patrons would come into her cafe. Oh, Saphira, we love you, we're so good with our dragons. But then the second these patrons see her interacting with Aiden's dragon Sparky, and like watching Sparky listen to Saphira more than Aiden, they're like, she tried to steal this dragon? She tried to move up in society? Gross. ugh. And I think the book could have had so much more with that. It could have done so much, it could have done so much more with the class divide, and it didn't, and it was a letdown. And I gave it a 1.75. I would have given it a 2, but anything that like gives me like an ick in like a bad way gets dropped down to a 1. Like anything that I think can be like kind of not like harmful, but like ugh, teetering the line. And I did not like how in this book they kept calling men who were in their early 20s, like 20, 21, they kept calling them boys, but in a way like, ugh, you know how boys are, he's just a boy, he's just a boy. I'm like, this boy is 2 years younger than you, and he's getting more leeway because he's a boy, but he's actually a grown man. He's not like a 15, he's 22. Can we stop calling these grown men boys? Didn't like it, gave me the ick, that's why I put it down to a 1.75. And I was kind of disappointed because I did end up getting the 3rd book through NetGalley. So that's why I started reading this first one, and after I got through that I was like, never mind, I am not gonna make it to book 3. I can't do this. I should have DNF'd this, but I didn't. The 3rd book I read was the Honeycrisp Orchard Inn by Valerie Bowman, and I liked this. It was girl has to go back home. Her family owns a inn, like a bed and breakfast type of situation. It's on the same property as an orchard, which like best friend's family, like growing up, they have a son about her age. Nothing ever happened between them, but you find out that this guy has had a major crush on her since they were kids. She just went through a big breakup. They don't know like the real reason why she's there, which is she also got like totally screwed over by the ex-boyfriend, but she's like, shit, don't talk about it. Don't worry about that. I'm just here to visit, no big deal. So she ends up coming, and she's an event planner, so she's helping the orchard kind of find, the orchard and the inn find new life and get new clientele and bring people in. And it was just such a nice, light, sweet romance, the small come back home type of deal, and I just had such a fun time with it. What was the character's name in this? Ellie. And I want to say that the love interest name in this was also Aiden. Yep, it was also Aiden, so that was very jarring going from an Aiden to an Aiden. But also it says, for fans of the Love Light series and the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, like in this description, it's better than Pumpkin Spice Cafe. I've read the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. This is better than that. This I would put well above the Pumpkin Spice Cafe universe. Then for a buddy read that I read with a couple of my friends, I read Girl in Translation by Jean Kwok. And this is a young adult contemporary fiction. So we are following a young girl and her mother who immigrate from Hong Kong to the US with the help of the mother's sister, and the grueling situation that this aunt figure to our main character, Kimberly. Yes, Kimberly. Yeah, remember that one. Because she comes when she's 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, something like that. And maybe just like that preteen stage. She does not speak any English. She comes, she gets put into a better school than the area that she's living in because her aunt has just put her up in the shittiest shithole ever. And it's like, you owe us. Come work in our clothes factory. I'm gonna pay you absolutely nothing. Plus you owe me for me bringing you here and all of your medical bills so you didn't die. And it's just the lording over of you owe me is crazy in this book, but not unrealistic. And it's just such a good read. I think this is a great YA read. I think it's great for high school students especially to read this book. I gave this book a 4. It was heart-wrenching but so good. Such a good read. The next book I read was the 3rd book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series by Matt Dinneman, and that is the Dungeons Anarchist Cookbook. And I will tell you something about me reading this series. It's a lit RPG, so it's like you're in a video game aliens have come, they've destroyed Earth essentially, and now all of the humans are fighting for survival inside of the dungeon, which is just crushed, like levels of a video game crushed down below the surface of the Earth, and you're having to fight for your life. If you want to live, well, you better fight. So the thing about me reading this is there are so many different parts going on in this series. There's what's happening in the game itself, how the game is speaking to the universe at large, how the different solar systems interact as like corporations, and it's pretty exhausting keeping everything straight, because not only are you trying to know the crawlers, so the people who are in this video game, like the humans, you're trying to understand the relationships between everyone there, who is crazy, who will kill you, who's trying to kill Carl and Donut, our main characters, who's being added to the party. What is the goal of this dungeon level? How do we find the staircase to the next level? And what is happening outside of this game that is affecting what's going on inside? And it's so confusing, but I love it so much. I am having such a fun time with it, and I only hardly know what's going on. I gave it a 4. I gave it a 4. I'm having so much fun. I love it. I love it. I don't think there's too much to say about plot and stuff when it comes to the sequel of stuff. You just have to go back to the first one. And then finally, the last book I read in November was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. And I listened to this, so that was a great time listening to this over audiobook. He does great little voices for all of the characters. I always knew who was talking. It was sweet. It was a sweet read. I would be interested in listening to the next one. We're following an orc, V, who comes ready for a new life. She's been swinging her sword for long enough. She's been, you know, the muscle, the hired help, if you will, long enough, and she's ready to settle down. She's ready to open a cafe because she had gnomish coffee once, and she is all about it now. She is a coffee girly, and that's all she wants to do. And it was very sweet building of found family and just coming together and bringing these odd sorts of people from different walks of life together to have a community. And I thought it was really sweet. I gave it a 3.75. I think listening to it was a lot better than if I were to read it, because again, the author does the narrating and he just does a lovely job. It's just such a fun read. The voices he does, the inflections, I feel like when, especially if an author is going to read their own fantasy work, I want to give that a listen, because now not only are you getting their idea of the world by being told, now you get to also hear what they themselves envision their characters to sound like. But now I have to pick the book of the month for this month, and nothing is truly jumping off the page at me. I have a couple 4 stars. Like, what did I have fun with? Because sometimes they lose ratings just because the writing itself or the story pacing is odd. And plus, I think like the Dungeon Crawler Carl book could have been moved up more if I understood it more. I think based off of fun. We're gonna base this month off of fun, and I'm gonna give this one to Legends and Lattes. I enjoyed the listen. Now, if this was not a listening experience and I read it, maybe this wouldn't even be the contest, but having listened to it, I think really improved my overall experience of the book itself. We're gonna go with Legends and Lattes. Oh, we're so excited, so excited. Oh, goodness me. One final month. My throat is killing me. December. Oh, December. I ended up reading 7 books in December, which is crazy because I didn't finish the first book of December until the 10th. There's a couple shorter books in here, so maybe that's how I ended up catching up, but either way. The first book I read in December was the second book in the Beartown series, Us Against You by Frederick Bachman. And again, emotional. I don't feel like I was as tortured. I had just different torturous stuff came up in Us Against You. I'm not gonna go more into what exactly this book pertains. It's more of like the aftermath of what happened in book 1, and then just more shit. more devastation. That's what we're looking for. More devastation for sure. Just emotional turmoil. But I think the biggest thing is the hints at the end of that book about what's to come in the third book, The Winners, which I'm just not ready for, but I did pick up from the library yesterday, so I will be reading it in January. We will be doing that pretty early in the year, finishing out that 3-book series. And I already can tell you I want this book series for my shelf. That's going up there. They're going up there. I gave this book a 4.5. Didn't hit as hard as the first one, but still so good. Still don't count it out. This is going to be easily an overall 5-star series. The next thing I read was A Christmas Carol, and I listened to it on Spotify, and I understood more of it than I thought I was going to understand. And I think listening to it helped, and obviously being pretty familiar with the book itself. And then a YouTuber that I really like hearing book breakdowns and just book thoughts overall also read this book and put out a full-length video like going through the entire book, so I felt like I was in book club, which was great because after I finished A Christmas Carol, I had so many thoughts and feelings just about this story that is just lives in the zeitgeist. And I felt odd going up to people and being like, oh my gosh, I read A Christmas Carol, when everyone kind of already knows what happens in A Christmas Carol, but be like, no, but I just read it and I'm learning new things, and I'm, you know, just understanding it a bit more. Yeah, it was a great read. I think I really needed it, and I would love to physically read it next Christmas season. I think it helped me because mentally just the Christmas season kind of gets me every year. I think that A Christmas Carol honestly did just like lift me up out of my Scroogey mood. It helped. It definitely helped. I would love to reread it at the end of next year. Okay, the next book I read, 4th book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, At the Gate of the Feral Gods, again by Matt Dinneman. And these books are getting longer. They are getting longer. I don't know that this needed to be as long as it was. I gave it another 4. I feel like I'm getting better at understanding RPG language. I think that, first of all, the RPG language is hard for me to get my head around. And then the second thing is having so many corporate characters, dungeon characters, political issues, and just the vast galactic races that all of these corporations and solar systems have. So I'm like, okay, Volti? What does that mean? Borant? What does that mean? But still, really loved this. Gave it another solid 4. I will be hopefully finishing this series in 2026. And then I read The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. And this is a YA fantasy series, and we are in a prison. What is this character's name? This is crazy. I finished this book a week ago, and I can't remember what this character's name is. And I am reading the second book currently. I'm like 50 pages into the second book right now, and I can't remember this character's name. Alright, Kiva. So we're following Kiva. She's in a prison, and she went there as a child. She's been there for 10 years, and she took over the prison healer job when she was 12. So this whole place, this whole getup depends on her medical knowledge, but luckily her father was an actual trained healer, and when she was a child he taught her some things, and she did do some work with him in the prison because he was the prison healer. And my biggest gripe with this book, I love this idea, I love this concept. I totally guess the twists, but I am an adult. This is a YA, but I also think this book is a bit heavy-handed. I don't think much happened in this book. Not a lot happened. She didn't really do anything. And it's just kind of hard to root for her or like understand her. She doesn't do much. She takes her prison healing job very seriously. She does genuinely want to heal everyone that comes to her, no matter what their ailments and issues are. Now, obviously there's more political stuff happening. Like, why is she there? Why did she go there when she was 7? You may ask. I don't know. She went because her dad went, because he was seen in cahoots with a rebel. So we've got rebels, we've got the kingdom. There is magic in this world. There's elemental magic. A lot of it felt very clear to me where we were heading for most of the time. But also I just couldn't stop thinking about the fact that she's been there for 10 years. She's 17. She's a prison healer. She is 17. She started learning stuff from her papa when she was 7. Okay, what are you retaining at 7? What are you retaining at 7? And it's like, it says a lot of like, oh, prisoners hardly last around here, except for that one, and 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 me. Okay, so what? How have you been here since you were 7? The timeline does not make sense. She should not, I don't know, be as good of a healer and know all these things as well as she does, in my opinion. Because then she also goes like, my father didn't leave me any notes to help with blah, 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 blah. Okay, then why do you know so much? Been in prison since you were 7. Every time I started to think that I'd have to push it to the side and plot on. Overall, I gave it a 3.5. I think the writing was decent. It gets kind of repetitive, but I liked it. I'm reading the second one. There's 3, I think, so I didn't give up on it. I am hoping that there's no more than 3 though. The next book I read was Cats, Paws, and Curses by Nancy Warren. This is a part of the Vampire Knitting Club series. I have read this entire series. I think there's like 15 books. This is that cozy mystery. For some reason there's always a murder book series. The woman who owns the knit shop, she puts on a knitting circle, a death happens. This is book 8.5. It's a 90-page novella. Short story at that point. I don't know what the difference is. But I thought it would be nice to revisit the Vampire Knitting series because it's been a while since I've read it, and it was one of the series that I was reading when I was getting back into reading after I've had my kids. I gave this a 3. It was a bit of a nothing burger. I already knew the whole setup. I knew how this whole thing was going to play out. It's fine. All right, I've got 2 more books on this list and my battery is flashing, so we'll see how far we get. I might have to do the outro tomorrow, okay? The next book I read is a debut novel by an indie author. So when it comes to me reviewing full debut indie author books, I try not to say too much. I'll tell you my honest rating and some of my quips with it, but we'll keep it brief just because I think I had read a debut indie author in August. I don't want to go on too much. Like, that's a lot of work to put in by yourself to be able to write and put out a book, and without all of these, you know, editor, publicist, all of these phases that things could get adjusted and noticed, they don't have. So this is a lot of work to put in. So the next book I read was Pinned by Amanda Barish, and I think this book needed some beta readers if they were able to access something like that, and maybe a couple more edits. There was times where it switched POVs in the middle of a scene, like it would be like, and then she said this, and then he touched my that, and it's like, is it she or my? Is it she or my? So stuff like that really took me out of the story, but we are following a CPS worker, and we get to kind of follow her mentally dealing with the grueling type mental work that she does in a day to keep kids safe, and how she uses the gym as an outlet to have some kind of control and to, you know, get just have like a place where she doesn't have to focus on the hardships of her job. And then there's a love interest that's in the gym as well. So that's really all I'm gonna say on that book. Again, I think just it needed maybe a couple more read-throughs and adjustments, but I think as a debut, very promising. And then finally, the last book I read was The History of the Snowman by Bob Eckstein. Sorry. And he just wanted to know who built the first snowman. So this was just a resource history book about snowmen, because why not, 'tis the season. I gave it a 3.25. I feel like some of the references, I was like, I don't know about that, but overall, I liked it. Did I retain any of it? Not really. It was a history book about snowmen, but it's interesting to hear when like the first depicted snowmen were, and how in some writings they talk about making snow sculptures or snow monuments to like gods and stuff, which is very interesting. It was a fun little read and full of pictures. Full of pictures and like political cartoons. So it was fun to see the snowman from like its political side and its artistic side, and how it has played in, you know, us being kids and just explore the outside and build things that look like us. And it was a fun small read. It was 192 pages, so, and a lot of it was pictures. It was nice. It was a nice thing to read. I'm glad that I saw it on the library shelf and decided to snag it. Holy cow, but what is the book of the month for December? I think it's gonna have to be Us Against You by Friedrich Bachmann. Yeah, amazing. So fucking good. I devoured, I think I read like over 200 pages at one point during that read, like in a day. Yeah, that's 2 for Friedrich Bachmann for the books of the months. And eventually we will do a bracket breakdown of all of those to come. That will be to come. But thank you so much for watching this video. I am running out of battery. I hope you've enjoyed this little chit chat talk. Let me know if there's anything you want to hear more about. If you want deeper dives into books, maybe we can start doing that, because I think I kind of went off a little bit on Baby Dragon Cafe, maybe a little bit too hard. But let me know what you want to see, and I will see you in the next one.